Series, Ted Sullivan! And now let's meet the stars of the show, starting with Kenneth Mitchell! Keeping going with some big Stamets for enthusiasm for Anthony Rapp! Wiseman! Shazad, Latif! Jones! And of course, Sonequa
This is different.
There's a microphone. Well, welcome to Fan Expo, everybody. There might be short microphones. I might need to share them a little bit. But the first question, you got a microphone in your hand, Sonequa, so this first one is for you. We're all very excited to meet your character, Michael. We know that she has a Vulcan upbringing and an interesting relationship with Spock's father, Sarek. So what can you tell us about that dynamic and how important that Vulcan upbringing is to this character?
Oh, that Vulcan upbringing is kind of everything. I can tell you that I am 100% human, and my parents were killed when I was very young, and it happened at a Vulcan outpost, and so I was committed to Sarek and Amanda. So they became my surrogate parents, and Spock my surrogate mother. and yes, it was quite the culture shock. That's an understatement, but having to go from being human to assimilating to being Vulcan, it's a lot of pressure, and yeah, there's an identity crisis.
All right, moving on to Jason Isaacs. We're very excited for your Captain Lorca. Now you
Thank you, those two people. Who
you described Captain Lorca as a bit of a messed up guy. So is there anything you can tell
I
us
didn't
about?
actually say messed up. I said something else.
You did. I was told not allowed to swear. But what is it about this character that makes him this way? And was this one of the reasons why you signed on to bring this character to life?
Answer the first question, I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you anything that happens in the show. You're going to have to watch the show. That's why we made it. And what was the second question?
What was one of the
Oh yeah, that is the reason I did it. There was no point trying to step in the gigantic boots of the people who captained starships before. I was raised on the original series, and there's nobody. I could even approach the foothills of what William Shatner did. So, and so should. So there was no point trying to be a captain in a starship. The original series was burned so deep into my DNA. But this wasn't that. This was an interesting, complicated character, as they all are, on a long journey as opposed to episodic thing. It felt like an acting job. It didn't feel like going to be a hero captain of a starship. It felt like a story for our times, and that's what I did.
We'd like to introduce Vera, our sign language interpreter here on the side of the stage as well. Give her a big round of applause. Mr. Jones, thank you so much for all the amazing work you've done over all the years. You're such a hero of our speaks. Tell us a bit about Lieutenant Saru or Saru? Saru, he's a Kelpian.
Saru,
Saru
is a Kelpian.
You got some ADR to do. Yes, Lieutenant Saru is a Kelpian, and that's I'm the first of my species to ever be seen on any Star Trek show or movie ever. I know, right? It's kind of a fun thing to help develop from the actor side anyway, a brand new species. Kelpians are a prey species of where I come from, so we are the hunted, we are the farmed, we are the herded, we are the eaten. And so I am the first of my kind to go through Starfleet Academy and to rise to a position of a high-ranking officer on a starship. So that's kind of exciting, and that puts me in a brother-sister relationship with this one right here, because she's the first human to go through Vulcan Academy. I'm the first Kelpian to go through Starfleet Academy. So we're very competitive with one another. We're kind of elbowing out like, I know, I want that captain's chair one day, not you. Yeah. So we have a very healthy brother-sister relationship. We annoy each other, but we also have a deep, deep love and admiration for each other. So at least she does for me anyway, I know. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Well, let's talk about one of the very established alien races in Star Trek, the Klingons. Kenneth, bringing to life Cole. We have so many great examples of Klingon characters. Worf, they're so dynamic, they're so rich. So what are we getting with Cole, and how does he fit into the Klingons?
Cole. First of all, hello, humans.
Cole, he is the house leader of the House of Kor. He's a great warrior. He is a bit of an alpha Klingon amongst the Klingon leaders. We're at war here, and the stakes are high, and the series kind of explores the 24 different houses and their different ideologies, and we're not always agreeing with one another, and especially Cole. He has large conflict and disagreements with one of the other leaders, Tukufma, who you saw in the trailer. And then there are these guys, the Federation. Humans, Kelpians. Cole likes to eat Kelpians for breakfast. Not true. I'm an appetizer, that's all.
Okay, well, Anthony, we're very excited. Yes, it's your turn.
Hello?
We're very excited to meet Kenneth Stamets. Now, what is it about this character that you're so excited, to bring to the Star Trek universe?
Palest member of Star Trek. Interest? No. Paul Stamets, there is a real Paul Stamets, so I think if people have been paying attention and if they saw the word astromycology, they're like, why is there a dude working with mushrooms and fungus in Star Trek? Well, there's a real Paul Stamets that my character is inspired by, and Ted Sullivan, who's a writer in the room, can maybe speak. He did come to the writer's room, right? The real Paul Stamets, and said hi, and he's a Star Trek fan himself, right?
Yeah.
And he was honored by this?
Very much so. He was very, very excited to be part of it, and we're incorporating a lot of his ideology and science into the actual storyline of the show.
So that's cool in and of itself. He has a TED Talk that I watched, that if you're interested in these kinds of things at all, is a really inspiring TED Talk. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason, among others, is that I'm a nerd myself, and I'm a Star Trek fan, so I never thought that I'd be on Star Trek, so it's kind of like my head is exploding all the time. So if you want to see like that, knowing that that's happening in my brain as I'm holding a communicator and a phaser and doing things, that'd be fun. And then the other thing that I'm, in all seriousness, really proud of is that it's the first time that there's been an openly gay character on the show, and my character. And one of the things about that is, in the great tradition of Star Trek, that's not an issue in any way. That is what it is. It's a fact of my character's life, just as it was a fact of Uhura's life that she was a black woman, and that fact of her life was never an issue in any way, shape, or form. So that's another reason I'm proud of it, is that it's a vision of the future in which that will be the case.
Okay. Mary, we're very excited to meet Captain Tilly. I know she's fresh out of the academy. I know she's probably got a lot to prove. What can you tell us about her and her relationship with Sonequa's character, Michael, as well?
Tilly, like myself, is very nervous to be on a spaceship, much like I am very nervous to be in front of all of you. And she's in her 4th year at Starfleet Academy and was assigned to Discovery. And by happenstance, she becomes roommates with Michael. And they're very, very different people, but I think that they find that they have a lot to learn from each other. And so they have kind of a beautiful relationship. And Sonequa's amazing, you guys. And you love her too.
This one is amazing. She's the one.
All of these people up here, you guys.
we're not done meeting you all yet. Shazad, we gotta talk about your character.
How you doing?
What can you tell him about, or what can you tell us about him? And also, is it true that you were locked in a cell with Jason and Rainn Wilson, who plays Harry Mudd? What was that like?
Yeah, that's how we meet Ash Tyler in a prison cell with Jason and Rainn Wilson, which was very fun and very weird. We all have very different energies, so it was just a great way to enter the series. We meet him as a POW, and he, in a very dark place, and we follow him as he tries to, find some kind of normality as he goes back on the ship.
Yeah, I know Ted is co-executive producer, writer. I understand you're on set a lot. How challenging is it to bring new and exciting stories, but also respect the canon of Star Trek?
Well, basically in the writers' room, we kind of treat canon as arithmetic. It's like basic math. You start the story, you check your math, and you go like, well, if we tell this story, will it bump up against canon? Is there something else? Or will we run into a problem down the road? But where story really lives is more like in the calculus of storytelling, the themes and the characters. So once we've addressed the canon, we just really focus on what's the point of this story. One thing that kind of drives me a little crazy about serialized storytelling is that each episode doesn't have a theme, and it's supposed to. They're chapters, but they should also have a beginning, middle, and end. And we're really endeavoring to do that and to say, well, how are we reflecting the political times, the social times, the environmental times, and what's the point of this 40 or 50 minutes of television that we're doing? So canon is an important part of it, and we do a final canon pass afterwards, but we tend to focus more on what's the best story we can tell, and how do we use these characters, because we're also doing a version of Star Trek where people don't do a hard reset at the end of the episode. If someone dies, we remember it the next episode. If someone has a secret, we remember the next episode. And it changes. Our stories are not this happens, this happens, this happens, but this happens because that happened. And I think that's the really interesting part, but it's going to be the challenging part. It's a 15-hour movie, so you have to watch the whole thing to kind of understand, oh, that thing that happened in episode 2 actually pays off in episode 13.
I like you do a thing called a final canon pass. I picture like somebody in like a basement of a library with every piece of Star Trek.
That's Justin Bieber.
That's it.
That's
They don't need a library, they have it in their head. This is one of the weird things online. There are some people who think that the people who are writing it, people making it, are not Star Trek fans, but they are the biggest nerds you'll ever meet. In the room, they don't need a library, they don't need a split second to tell you that no, in series 4, in minute 9, there was this thing sitting on a shelf somewhere, so you can't do that.
I will say the first thing I ever wrote as a kid with my brother was after seeing Star Trek 3, I wrote a feature for Star Trek 4, which was my brother and I's, what we thought should happen in the next. So that was how I learned how to write, and it's because of Star Trek that I became a writer. So that's definitely why
Were there whales in your version of Star Trek?
There weren't whales, but there was a Klingon Federation war, and Kirk was caught in the middle because his son had just been killed by Klingons. So.
All right, well, 10 experts all about you and Ed. So let's open it up to the floor for questions. And you have the first question. Hello.
Hello, my name's Melody. Hi. Okay, so my question is, we are all incredibly excited for Star Trek, assumably. What about this process, whether it's a specific scene you're going to get to do, or getting to wear your costume, or getting to meet all your adoring fans, were you most excited about?
For anyone.
For anyone.
Holding a phaser and a communicator at the same time and saying into the communicator, energize. I was in the scene with Sonequa, and between takes I was literally like... That was among the things that...
I think I can hopefully speak. I don't know. I'll try to speak about it. Whatever. I'll speak for myself. It was just all of it. It was every single thing that you said and so much more. It was coming into this legacy, you know, like joining the Star Trek family and the history of it and the magnitude of it. And it was what it means, being able to be a part of that, being able to be a part of what I like to call the solution to today's problems. But anyway, I think, you know, just being able, I mean, there are lots of solutions, right? But being able to be one of them, at least, I believe, was a big...
I just had a vision in 10 years' time where we're all standing there going, yes, we can, I'm voting for you for president. The first black woman president, by the way.
You're too kind, y'all are too kind. That's funny. But yeah, and then also, you know, just to speak of like our present moment right here, just being able to be with these people. Like, these are exquisite people. And I don't say that lightly, and I really mean that when I say it. And everybody who isn't here, everybody in the writer's room, and, you know.
I will say one quick thing from a writer standpoint. My favorite thing was writing Beam Me Up.
I wanted to come back to Toronto. Because it's my favorite city in the world. I married a woman from Toronto, which means I get to come here and watch it for free, which is great. And I personally tried not to think about any of the stuff, because you can't think about what the fans are expecting or the legacy, because you're trying to just be in the story. If you think about any of that stuff, that cripples you. Anything that stops you from being completely free in the moment. And so I tried not to think about it. Even the first day that I said, just in the scene, I went energized, and afterwards I was like, did anybody notice what I just said? I tried not to get excited, but then we got out into the bridge, and there's a chair there, and it's just calling my name. And it's, you know, it's going, stick your ass on me now. I wouldn't do it. I spent the first 2 or 3 episodes conducting the war, standing like a, you know, the torpedoes were orchestra, you know, members of the orchestra, and I stood in front of the screen, and I just put off sitting in the chair, because when I finally sit there, it's like somebody goes, I have my buttocks, where William Shatner and Sir Patrick Stewart and so many others have placed their holy buttocks. And I still try very little to sit in the chair. I feel that it's too great, it resonates with too great a history. But that was it for me, sitting down in that chair.
Hi, it's Mark from Montreal. Question to Jason. Great job in the haircut from Harry Potter. Also, how do you like working? Have you ever gone to the Harry Potter land in Orlando? Also, how do you like upgrading from Slytherin to Star Trek? And last question. Very last question. Okay. How do you like working with the big snake?
How the big snake? Well, I call it Spot from Harry Potter. Oh, I see. You know what? In the panel tomorrow, I'll talk Harry Potter until your ears fall off. But the truth is that, much like being on Harry Potter, my favourite thing when I look back is not the amazing stories, you know, the fact that millions of people around the world love it. It's a pleasure meeting them. You know, and I think the same will be true with the Star Trek fandom. Just the amount of passion and enthusiasm people have for it is overwhelming. But really, what I take away from it, my experience, is hanging out with other people and who they are and what they're like and how much fun they are and how talented they are. And that's not really anything that the fans can share, but selfishly, acting is, you know, people come up and go, thank you so much for being in the show, or thank you so much for making those things. We don't really do it for anyone else, we do it because it's really good fun.
My question for you is, which character or cast member of Star Trek got your inspiration for the new series?
You say which character?
Which character or cast member from the previous Star Trek shows or films?
I mean, Sarek is a member of our cast, and so I think that I don't know. I mean, that whole dynamic of Sarek and Spock and Vulcan and human is, I think, part of it, right?
So I'm just trying to follow up. The main thrust of the question was, I missed it.
Which of the past characters are sort of inspiring what we're doing with our show?
I think probably the character I would say is Gene Roddenberry. And I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but I think in general what we're doing is trying to live up to what he was trying to do, which is for Star Trek to be a mirror for what's going on in the world right now. And yes, we will have characters that come in and out like Harry Mudd and Sarek and that type of stuff, but in essence, at the core, it's Gene Roddenberry.
Thank you.
Hi. You've already said that you're bringing back Harry Mudd. Is there anything else from any other Star Trek series that you want to bring back, or you are bringing back? For example, like the Mirror Universe?
Well, sure, we'll tell you everything right now.
What's your email address? I'll just send you the script.
There are Easter eggs all over this place, and I think if you are a new Star Trek fan, you're going to go, I love Star Trek and I didn't know it. And if you're a old Star Trek fan, you're going to be like, I get that, no one else gets it. And that's
We're not going to spoil anything though.
Hi there, my name is Aaron. I'm a long-time Star Trek fan, and I'm really excited to see the new series. I'm confused though, what's the actual timeline that it's supposed to be in? Because I hear it's the prime timeline, but it looks like it's the other timeline. Or is it a whole new one that you guys
It's totally prime, it's totally prime, it's totally prime. It's 100% prime, it's 100% prime, totally prime.
Someone was speaking Klingon earlier. Do you guys sign Klingon?
You think she can sign with the plow?
The one thing I will just say to that other question is, this is a little bit about the question about canon, and sometimes I think there's malleable canon, and I think there's hard canon. You don't have Gorn suddenly show up because we haven't met Gorns yet. But Star Trek always evolves and changes, and Star Trek's never been about the special effects and the sets. It's about what's the story we're telling. So I think also to tie the hands of certain artists, like set designers, and makeup artists, and costume designers, doesn't make any sense. We're doing a version, we're paying respect, but it also has to reflect a modern TV show, and I think we're being really respectful, but we're also doing a updated version of it that I think everyone can be proud of once they get used to it.
And just to clarify as well, so we know it's prime, but there was a lot of speculation about with this series before any sort of announcements or clarifications were made online was when it occurs. So can you just it is 10 years before?
10 years before the original, before Kirk and Spock, before we joined their mission. It's 2 years after the Cage. Yeah, it's 2 years after the Cage. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. I have a question for Anthony. Hello. I'm a person of a certain generation, and as a result, I was a huge Rent fan. And I remember, reading about the development of Rent, and it was you and the original cast and Jonathan, and you really created something from scratch then, and then it became such a massive phenomenon. Here, you're leaping into a very established universe, and I wonder what the difference was in your creative process when going from creating something from absolute scratch to jumping into something established.
It's interesting. In both cases, though, the character and the world of this specific story are being created from scratch, so there's not a lot of difference in terms of that. It still is a collaborative process between myself and the creative team and my fellow actors to discover who we are in this world. I did have the benefit, though, of being able to look at the 50 years worth of material that's been assembled as sources of inspiration. And there's so much inspiration to gather from the quality of writing and acting that's come before. But Jonathan Larson, who wrote Red, was also basing it on La La Land. So there's that to draw from too. So there's been, you know, a legacy. What I feel is a parallel of the experience also though is that I did get to be a part of a community of people who love Rent so much and it's changed their lives. And they use that phrase, and I know that that's a phrase that people use about Star Trek as well. And so that I feel like I've been prepared in a way to be a part of that. You know, I'm eager to be a part of that as well, and to do my part to honor what came before. Thank you.
Hello. The Star Trek universe is like a universe that so many people dream of like being in. And I was wondering if there was any other fictional universes that any of you dreamed of being in when you were growing up. And yeah.
What are you whispering there, Mary?
I would like to be a Middle Earth. So, anybody else?
Reading comic books when I was a kid, I wanted to be in anything Marvel or DC. I've had a chance to do both now in my launcher. So getting to fly through the sky as the Silver Surfer was a big honor for me. And I'm also, you know, I was in Batman Returns as one of Danny DeVito's little henchman sidekicks. So this is I have an odd resume. Got a childhood dream come true kind of resume, really. Yeah.
Jealousy.
I wanted to play for Liverpool.
I grew up such a nerd and a fan of comic book. I've not been acting since I was a little kid, but I never thought of myself in any of it. I never thought, oh, I'd like to do that, because I loved being a consumer of it. So I never even thought that it would be possible that I would be part of something. So that's the other part of it, is it seems so unlikely and crazy that I am. And I feel really lucky for that.
I want to be in Lion King.
I always wanted to live in the Matrix. The funny connection about that with my job now is, I don't know if you guys have seen Klingon spelt out phonetically, but the Klingons on this show, and we have scenes in Klingon, we are speaking Klingon. And when you look at my script in Klingon, it looks like the Matrix. And I can't wait to share pictures of my script with you once the show has aired.
Great question. Hello.
Hello, hi. I'm such a huge fan. I'm an immigrant and was raised by a single father, and Star Trek was the first thing that we bonded on when I was 8 years old. So I'm really, really excited, and hearing you talk about how it's about the stories and not about the sets, I feel a lot more confident. So I was just wondering, traditionally Star Trek focused on various characters, like there would be a Captain Janeway episode, or a Geordi LaForge episode, or an Uhura episode. So in this series, will you have that, or will it mostly focus on Sonequa's character?
Look at me on those questions.
Sonequa is playing the main character, but there are episodes. Episode 8 is a Saru episode. I would say episode 5 is a Tyler episode. So, I mean, there's Tilly episodes and there's Stamets episodes, and that's the great thing about having A, B, and C stories on the show, and you get to focus on people a little bit more. I grew up with Next Gen, and Next Gen for me did a better job than even TOS did in fleshing out the other characters. We get hints of Uhura speaking Swahili, which is great, but we don't really get an Uhura story. So Next Gen did a great job of that. Certainly Deep Space Nine did an amazing job of that. And everyone in the writers room are real big Next Gen and DS9, like big fans. So Deep Space Nine did serialized storytelling in an unbelievable way by the time you got to later seasons, and we hope to emulate that, but also focus. When you have this lineup of actors, and even everyone's not here, you of course have to focus on each one of them, because you want to get to know them.
Thank you. Can I just say, thank you for sharing your history with the show. That was so beautiful, and to heighten what Jason was saying earlier, it is about what we share together, but it is also about you. We're all in it together, and you are I'm so excited to have you.
Yeah, I think we also all have a lot of these kind of stories where, yeah, like I grew up watching with my dad in Chinese. And I learned English watching Voyager. My question's actually for Doug Jones. Hi. You're really well known for playing characters where your face is heavily made up and masked.
Fortunately for you, yes. Nobody wants to see you.
Come on! We want to see you. Like from Hellboy to the Silver Surfer to Pan's Labyrinth. What is your, I want to know for Saru, what are some of the differences and similarities in your approach to a character where you can't actually show, show your acting through your facial features, but need it to be a little bit different in your portrayal?
Right. Great question. 30 years of playing otherworldly characters has led to this question. So yeah, and it's how do you make this one different than the last 18,000 that I've played, right? So it starts with the character design, really, and the design team, Neville Page and Glenn Hetrick, just knocked this one out of the park. I think Saru is he is an alien, he's another species, but he's also warm and friendly and connectable, I think. The design helps me, and the writers absolutely, with the backstory and where he comes from and who he is and what his goals and needs and wants and loves are. That all comes into play as well. But then when I look at myself in the mirror from head to toe, the boots really informed a lot on this one. I'm up in hoof feet, so I'm up on the balls of my feet all day, in pain, for you. But that if I can show it, that kind of threw my balance off, because I was up like this, kind of going, well, there's my hips there, just up on my on the balls of my feet. So I ended up like, well, okay, then so if I walk with my arms like this, how about they're already hanging back here, so why don't we go sideways instead? So this supermodel thing happened just because of the way so the company strut is kind of like a gazelle, kind of graceful, but don't back me into a corner, I'll kick your ass. Thank you so much.
I wanted to say something, if I may, that there was a scene recently where I was off to the side, and it was a scene essentially between Doug and Mary, and I wasn't really watching, so I was just listening, and his voice also transforms. He's a tremendous actor, and he's not just a guy who wears rubber masks. His soul comes through, and it's through his voice, his being emanates through this rubber mask. It's really, it's an extraordinary thing to witness. And to be part of.
I know the scene you're talking about. It's, for me, the most, oh boy, I get emotional, damn. It's the most important scene I've written for Star Trek, maybe in my career, and it is, when it happens, you guys will know what scene it is. But Doug gives a performance that made me do my happy dance at the monitor, which I sometimes do. And that's usually when the cast knows I'm really happy with things, but I was like John Travolta.
I love you. I've never seen that happy dance.
There's still time.
So we just have time for a few more audience questions. So we'll do 2 more audience questions. But I do see I see someone cosplaying as a Klingon. We won't get to your question, but you want to give us a good kapla? So we'll do 2 more quick audience questions. So you, sir.
I'm so glad Anthony Rapp is finally in a Star Trek show, so that's awesome. Will you finally make my dream come true then and make a musical Star Trek episode?
When we were at San Diego Comic-Con a few weeks ago, we were like in this party band going from venue to venue doing a thing, and we broke out into like spontaneous carpool karaoke, and we could sing. People could sing in the cast, so we should do a musical episode. Co-executive producer.
If Coffee could do it, I don't see why we could sing.
And last audience question, yes, hello.
I feel kind of bad because I feel like my question was just kind of not Star Trek related, and I was interested in the cast. And by the way, Jason, we love you too, and we're so happy to have you back. But I'll let her ask the last
Oh, that's very
question.
kind
So,
of you. Lovely.
If you were in another Star Trek series, what would it be?
If we were in another Star Trek series, you said?
Season 2.
I'd love to work with Leonard Nimoy. But obviously that's not possible, but that would have been an unbelievable thing.
Yeah, I was born in 1960, so I grew up watching the original series on network television in its first run. So I would love to go back to, if I could just like go back in time and be just a fly on the wall of that ship, that would make me the happiest thing in the world. Yeah.
I agree. Leonard and Michelle. Would love to work.
I like the show I'm in.
We're gonna wrap it up in a second. Lastly, we just want to ask you, we're all going to meet your characters on September 24th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern on CTV in Space when Star Trek Discovery premieres, and we're very, very excited for that. I know all of us fans have been waiting and kind of bursting with anticipation, but just to kind of wrap this up, I mean, how do you guys feel? Because you as the stars of the show and executive producer, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into the thing for a long time. Now we're about to see the premiere. How are you all feeling right now? And is there anything you want to say to the fans before we get on board Star Trek Discovery? How do you feel right now?
You want to go first? No, you go. All right. The one thing I will say is this: I've seen, unlike these guys, episodes 1 through 11. I've done a lot of TV shows, probably 7 primetime shows, I think, something like that. This is the first time in my career I'm proud of the show. And I'm really proud of the show. And the only other thing I will say is my wife was watching me watch cuts of the show, and we would watch 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then it was a Saturday. And when we got to 6, she said, "Stop! I don't want to know. I want to watch it when it happens." So it's great.
We really haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen any, we've seen the trailers. We've seen tiny, every once in a while we can go over to the monitor on the set and see a little bit of a clip of some, what we just shot, but we haven't seen it. So I'm just dying to see it. I want us to have a viewing party, and watch it together, because we're really proud and really, really, really excited. And I know that there's been, a lot of anticipation, and people love this so much, this world, this Star Trek, and there's some trepidation, there's some fear, understandable, because it's something that is really precious. And I promise you that we are doing our utmost to honor everything that's come before and to make something new that we can also be proud of. So.
We truly do believe in it, and I hope we have fun together, you guys. I think we will.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of Fan Expo. Thank you for being here. Can't wait. Star Trek Discovery premieres September 24th. With a big Fan Expo.